It's good.
Today I'm going to mention the name Claire Alexander. Check one. Claire Alexander. Played for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the 1970s. And what does he have to do with reading? I will share.
Now I'm intrigued.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Welcome to Hallway Conversations. We're a trio of educators who have plenty of questions about teaching and learning and school culture, and we believe in the value of reflection and collaboration as we seek to keep growing as teachers. This podcast is our place for thinking out loud together about issues in education and why they might matter to Christian educators. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hallway Conversations. My name is Matt Beamers.
I'm Abby DeGirl.
And I'm Dave Mulder.
In a book titled Vision of Vocation, Common Grace for the Common Good, author Stephen Garber says, quote, "We know in our deepest place how hard it is to keep our eyes open to the complexity of the broken world around us, to keep feeling the pains of a world that is not the way it is supposed to be, and knowing the difficulties, choosing to engage it rather than being numb by it." I really love those words, Dave and Abby, and I sometimes think when I think about this podcast and the three of us sitting around the table and some of the pre-conversation and post-podcast conversation, I think for myself, it's a way for me to choose to engage the world rather than be numbed by it. And so I just come today, I guess, being really thankful for the three of us and what it means to me. And if you are new to Hallway Conversations, the general format is that we bring a topic or a question and we circle around it and explore our own thinking. But we also really appreciate getting questions from you, our listeners. So if you have time in the future, please email us or even send us a recording of your question to hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. That's hallwayconvospod@gmail.com. Now, Dave and Abby, I have a friend whose name might be Justin, who every once in a while sends me the back of a hockey card.
Of course he does.
Totally. It's very random. And there's no picture and there's no name. And he says to me, "Who is this?" And these hockey cards are 30 or 40 years ago. And the reason that he sends this to me is because one of the ways I learned how to read was by playing with hockey cards. And to this day, for whatever reason, I have a photographic memory about absolutely nothing. I couldn't even tell you where my keys are right now, and sadly, that's the truth. But I can remember the back of almost every hockey card I've looked at as a kid. It's scary. Like, so he'll send this to me, and all of a sudden, I'll look at it and I'll say, "Oh, that's Claire Alexander." And did you know Claire Alexander in a 1975 hockey card they played for the Toronto Maple Leafs? It says at the bottom, "Claire is a milkman in the summer." I remember that. That hockey card is 45 years old, and I still remember. And again, I don't know where my keys are.
Formative.
Very formative.
Seared into your memory.
It is seared into my memory. And so he sends me the backs of these hockey cards, and I get every one, and I'm just saying and I think partly because those hockey cards were so important to me.
Sure.
So important to me that I still remember that. Now, I'm sharing that story with you because, Abby, earlier today you mentioned something about an assignment about a reading biography, and as soon as you said reading biography, I right away thought Claire Alexander.
There you go.
That's the association.
A hockey player from the 1970s who was a milkman in the summer.
Yep. See, and this is interesting because mine is very different.
I'm shocked to hear this, friends.
As are all of the students that are responding to this assignment.
So you said that. I thought of Claire Alexander, but we didn't have much time to talk. So I guess I'm just thinking in the context of that shaped me as a reader, one little, hockey cards. And I'm just wondering, and now I'm curious about the assignment because I've been thinking about my own reading story.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering, can you just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's the beginning of a semester here, and one of the assignments that our friend Dr. Gwen Mara and I assign in adolescent and children's literature, which is a class that we co-teach all of our L.Ed. majors have to take it, and then our middle and secondary English majors
Right.
take. And so I kind of focus on adolescent lit, and Gwen kind of focuses on children's lit, and we co-teach the class together with all of these students. And one of the assignments we do early in the semester, because our goal is for our students to read a wide variety of books that they could assign and use in their future classrooms.
Sure.
And so they really do have to read a lot. We tell them figure on averaging at least a chapter book a week
Sure.
in that class.
Which is not insignificant, but
It's not. On top of all of their other homework, and especially if they're not in the habit of reading. And so we always want to get to know the students in our room and what kind of a ask this is for them as readers. So we have them write a reading biography, which is we have a series of questions that we'd like them to answer in kind of a letter format to us as professors, telling us, what was your experience in school of reading? What kind of reader were you? Were you kind of reluctant? Did it come easily for you? What did you like to read then? What do you like to read now?
Yeah.
What do your reading habits look like now? What do you imagine them to be in the future? And how do you want this class to shape your experience with books? And what are you hoping to, what are your goals for the semester in this class? And I have been reading them today. So I was grading, right?
Yeah.
And I've been reading them, and it's just so interesting to me how different everyone's experiences are. Everyone's going to be endorsed, for example, our allied students with the same K-6 endorsement. They can teach in K-6 classrooms, and in every classroom, they're going to teach reading.
Yeah, that's right.
And they all come from a very, very different backgrounds in relationship to that, and have different starting points and different endpoints. So it's just been on my mind and thinking about that.
So Abby, if I can follow up and just put you on the spot, I guess. So we know it wasn't hockey cards that
Not
formed
hockey
in
cards.
shape. But if I say to you, hey, what kind of reader were you? And maybe are you? But were you? If you just look back, sort of, can you just talk a little bit about what kind of reader you were, and maybe even books that shaped your experience?
Good question. So I like quiet.
Okay.
I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert. So reading was a lifeline for me in a lot of ways, right? Because I remember I would find, I had little hiding spots all over that I would go, read in when I was a kid. One of them, I was a small child. I remember reading in my parents' dryer with the door open with a flashlight.
What?
Yeah.
Come on.
No,
That's a terrible idea.
I know, right?
Kids, don't try this at home.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that, right?
Terrible idea.
But I remember doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
or
fascinating.
we camped a lot, and I would be up in my bunk with my little light, right? So very much of a refuge for me. I think I got started. My dad used to read to my sister and I on the couch right before bed, different books at different times. We did all the Little House on the Prairie.
Oh, yeah.
Treasures of the Snow at Christmas. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but it's a beautiful story. And so things like that. But I'm an indiscriminate reader. I read genre. I read all genres. I rarely put a book down.
Oh, yeah.
I rarely quit books. Anything can kind of hold my attention and pull me in. I like a lot of things.
That's cool.
Dave, how about you? If I said a reading biography, or sort of what drew you in?
This is fascinating for me thinking this through. And I think when I was very small, my mom read to me a lot. I have memories of, snuggling up with mom and reading picture books and stuff. And the public library in the town I grew up in Southern California was a big part of my life for my growing up years. To the point, we would go to the library every week. And there was a point where my mom had to put a limit to say you can only check out 20 books this week, right?
Wow.
That kind of a thing, because we were hauling home so many books, right? And so when I was little, picture books like Bill Pete books, the Wing Ding Dilly, those, I can't recite them, right? But I read them over and over again. When I started reading chapter books, the Ramona books from Beverly Cleary, I loved those ones. Encyclopedia Brown, I've read every Encyclopedia Brown book, right? When I got a little bit older, I really got into fantasy and science fiction. And so Lloyd Alexander, the Book of Three and the Black Cauldron, things like that captured my imagination. When I got a little older, I was reading a lot of C.S. Lewis and Lord of the Rings. And, that's part of my story. So yeah, like I've never had a time in my life that I didn't love reading. Books have been a very important part of my life, and I joke. This is no joke. The one time in my life I got mugged. I got mugged one time. I was in middle school, and
Oh my word!
Yeah, so many questions there.
I was in middle school, and like my friend Chris and I were biking back from the library, and we stopped at the Circle K, and some older kids beat us up for our money, basically.
But not your books.
Not our books. We took our books home with us, right? Yeah, and so like that's part of my story too. It was like on our way back from the library, and we got mugged, right? So that makes it sound very dramatic. It was mostly like I went home and cried because I got beat up, right? But yeah, I don't know. Like it's an interesting thought, and I think in schools we tend to have kids read with purpose so much of the time, right? Like we're reading for information, we're trying to read for purpose, and I worry sometimes that comes at the cost of reading for pleasure.
Yeah, I had a student write, I loved reading, I hated book reports.
Yeah. Right?
I just wanted to read.
I guess to close out my own story with this, I felt that so acutely after grad school when I finished my doctorate. I had done so much reading for purpose for years there that I just didn't even want to read. And it took me like a couple years to just get back into, because I've always read for pleasure. And like I didn't even want to. And so I found like I can't read nonfiction the way I used to. I used to read a lot of nonfiction, and now it's like I almost have to have a story, a narrative to kind of hook me. And so I do. Like I read a lot of like spy thrillers and stuff. Tom Clancy and Dan Brown, and anyway, I'm in the middle of a Tom Clancy book right now, and it's these big fat 1,000-page novels, you know, and I love that stuff.
Very plot driven. Very
Totally.
Yeah. I actually like plot-driven novels, and I also like to read literary nonfiction as well. And so going back and forth and reading a variety. I don't know. Do you go back and forth
it
with
depends.
what you read?
Well, and I say I don't read nonfiction. That's not true. Like Andy Crouch's latest book, I highly recommend.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I can't think of the title of it right now. It was absolutely amazing. Justin Bailey's book, which we reviewed at, last season. You know, like I do read some nonfiction, but yeah, like, I tend towards plot-driven. Action. It's got to have something that's going to capture my imagination that way.
So for a question for the both of you, if you think about your reading biography as it relates to your elementary school experience or your secondary school experience, what was maybe you're even thinking of a specific teacher. If I say, what did the classroom look like where reading was fun, where it happened easily, where it was encouraged, like. And if you're thinking of somebody specific, like, hey, name that to honor them. But just overall, if you think about your own reading biography, it's like, this was a class where reading, I have a positive memory of reading in that class. Like, what makes it a positive memory?
You know, interestingly, I think my reading habits were largely formed outside of classroom experiences. I think, like, I used to read the classics on my own because I was very curious.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I read Little Women in 6th grade, and my teacher, like, didn't believe me.
Of course you did. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, and I remember reading it. I mean, I still love that book. It's a great book. And a great movie as well.
Because you weren't trustworthy in grade 6 for some reason.
Right. Well, I think it was just so unusual.
Yeah.
Well, right. You don't expect 12-year-olds to typically pick up a book like that.
Right.
And not that they can't.
I have a daughter who's like that too.
Hey, that apple didn't fall far.
Yeah, but I think I liked high school reading because it was a little bit more serious, and it was more of an opportunity to actually read things that I were a little bit above, right? And we could dig into it and we could analyze a little bit. Like I'm an English major. I loved that kind of stuff. But I think really in college is where I kind of came into a community of like-minded readers and really began to see myself that way as well. So I'm going to call out Mary Dangler's modern novel class, right? Where it was the first time, I would think I was a sophomore when I took that course, and I was scared to death because
she had a reputation about her,
and
right?
She's a great teacher.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
But so I had so much respect for her, and I remember handing in my first analysis and the feedback she gave. Like I still remember the book. I remember what she said about it, right? It was there, and I think in college is where I kind of.
That was pretty formative.
It was formative.
Yeah. So if we have K to 12 teachers, and I'm not just talking English teachers, but K to 12 teachers who are wondering I want that. I want a culture of reading in my classroom. Like I want I don't want my classroom to be a place where reading is either discouraged or that it's always for work, or even if it is for to do a book report, whatever that looks like. What encouragements would you give to those teachers that, to put you on the spot as the local reading expert? But what would you say?
I don't think I'm a reading expert, but research shows choice, voice, right? Community. So I think creating a sense of sharing among students, allowing them to share what they're reading, giving them time to read in class.
Oh, yeah.
As an English teacher, I always felt bad when I gave students time to read because I felt like in some ways I wasn't doing my job. Right? But you would never say that to a PE teacher.
Right. If they didn't run in class, we expect them to practice the skill.
If it's a literature reading classroom, they should be reading in class. They should have choice. There should be some sort of reading community, because that is what I think motivates people. If you think of any time where someone, you're much more likely to pick up a book if someone gives it to you.
Oh, yeah.
Or recommends it. Right?
Matt, you personally are more likely to pick up.
I'm just talking about even when you come in here and you're like, hey, what should I read?
Yeah.
Which I
literally do regularly.
Which is a regular. I have a book from you in my bag right now.
Yeah.
Right? I think, so if you think about that human element has to be there. And I used to have other teachers or other adults come in my room and recommend books.
Yep. Oh, that was one of the most powerful things. So my last job in K-12, I was the technology director for a local Christian school. My office was right off the library. And so when middle school kids would be in there looking for books, I would always step out and just talk with them and hey, if you like that book, you should read this one next. And how often, if I'd recommend a book, the kid would take it with them, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
The power of that. And being readers, as a teacher, it's really important to being a reader yourself and be able to articulate how that enriches your life and what you're reading.
We say that in school leadership too, like leaders are readers. And I don't think I anticipated that when I first became a school leader. Is who has time to read? In fact, I can remember being part of a mentoring group, and they gave us a list of 15 things leaders do, and we had to put them in numerical order. What do you think is the most important down to the least important? And I remember one of them was reading journals, books, fiction, nonfiction about leadership. And I think I put that 14th or 15th. Who has time to read?
Right.
Yet I think all leaders, we have to be in the practice of reading.
Yeah, that's good.
I have one more question for you. Is that how does your reading biography, or how did your reading biography shape your approach to reading in your K-12 classroom or even in your university classroom? So I think about my sharing about hockey cards, that when I taught high school, I think I was good with kids bringing in Calvin and Hobbes, because my own biography was I just want to read what I'm interested in.
Yep.
And so I just thought, if that's where they're at in Calvin and Hobbes or whatever that looks like, I'd be I just want you reading and giving time as well. And I know that I gave tons of flexibility because I needed that flexibility, right? So we teach who we are. That really came out of that. So I'm just wondering how your own stories maybe impacted your own approach to reading in your classrooms.
It's funny that you say that. So I use picture books quite a bit as a science teacher, and I maybe have mentioned that on the podcast before, but it's amazing. Even 8th graders like to hear a read aloud. I'd say even high schoolers, even college students, they like to hear a read aloud. And I would choose, of course, ridiculous books. So my favorite example is when we were talking about the digestive system. My favorite picture book to read was The Gas We Pass. The Story of Farts.
Wow.
And it is marvelous.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah.
And it actually tells you a lot about how your digestive system works. Yeah. And the kids were dying because Mr. Muller's reading this book about farts in class, right? But, there's actually some serious learning that happens then, and it gives them a hook that everything else we're going to talk about hangs back on that hook then, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and I taught high school English, right? So I remember teaching that analysis piece. I wanted students to see how cool it is to think deeply about author's message, to think how does this relate to what we've learned, how does he weave words, how does style fit into this, right? I love all of that. So I used to teach Life of Pi to all of my seniors.
Oh, yeah. Which is a demanding text.
It's a demanding text, but it's also incredibly intriguing.
Oh, such a good, it's a great
story.
Yeah.
You want to, like, the plot moves, but yet it's literary complexity.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, like, to try to hook them on that, like, like it has something there's something deep here, and there's something to get here besides just a plot, which is always really fun for me to see.
Yeah, it just makes me think about like I think I shared a little bit about that, like I said, with hockey cards and fun books, but it also makes me realize as a school principal, I would try to read the book Wonder to the grade 6s every year, or to different, and so even as a school leader, I think there's ways to model that, and I think for me it was a bit selfish. It was like, how do I build relationship with students in the school?
Yeah. Yep.
And one of the ways was just reading out loud, and I think, like you said, right, like everybody loves a good story. And now I even have it as a dad. I have a daughter in high school, and I don't read to her anymore, but she's actually reading to me. So she has this book. Oh, it's one of my favorite books, Dad. I said, would you ever read? Would you want to read it to me? And she said yes. And I was surprised that we're on page 200 of this book that she absolutely loves and has read multiple times, and is just getting such delight in sharing it with me. And so it makes me think there's different ways
fabulous.
to do those read alouds. Friends, we know your time is valuable, and we want to thank you for joining us in the hallway today. Thank you for the good, God-delighting work that you're doing in your communities, and we hope that the Lord gives you what you can stand in need of this week. And as we send you into this day, we want to send you with a blessing. So to our listeners, whom we're so thankful for, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace, and give you peace, and give you peace. Amen. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a good week.
This podcast was literally dreamed up during one of our actual hallway conversations. Our music is by Ethan Mulder. Hallway Conversations is created and produced by Matt Beamers, Abby DeGroat, and Dave Mulder. Hey, we have a favor to ask of you. Would you be willing to rate this podcast or write a review in your podcast app? Or if you found this conversation interesting or helpful, would you consider sharing it on your social media? Those things really do help podcasters out, and we would be so, so grateful. Thanks for listening, friends.
Assign. We coach.
I didn't get that.
Thanks, Siri. Okay.
The key word is plot-driven.
Plot-driven. Oh, man.